All right, so obviously these are four pretty important areas. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about coverage first. And I think a lot of seniors understand that Medicare is changing,
Yes.
but they don't always understand why, or at least the true reasons as to why. They have maybe a lot of misinformation or misguided information when it comes to that stuff, but I always like to draw it out for folks. And so what I do is I draw a graph, and you can tell I'm the artist in my family.
Mm-hmm.
On this side of the graph, I'm going to go ahead and put dollar signs. Those dollar signs represents the amount of health care costs Medicare spends on us. Down here across the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and list your ages. And I think something that we can all agree on is as we live longer, our graph is going to look like that because we cost Medicare a little bit more money the older we get. It's kind of a fact of life. Now you have to understand Medicare was designed way back in 1965 and it was put together by our Congress. And back then Congress looked at it and said our average life expectancy was to live to 68, so we're going to build a program that covers health care costs for 3 to 5 short years. But when seniors got access to better health care, they started living longer. And nowadays, if you look at it, depending on which survey you look at, between the ages of 83 and 85 is our average life expectancy now. I think that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think sometimes Medicare looks at it and says, not so much, because we were designed to pay for health care costs here.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have to pay 15 or 20 years longer than we ever had to pay before, and for some people even 30 or 35 years. I mean, we have more people turning 100 right now than I can ever remember.
My aunt's going to be 98 in December.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. My mom was just short of 98 when she died.
And so Medicare designed to cover this little area, and now they're covering this big area, and you can see how that puts a little bit of a kink in Medicare's armor.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fact that, well, we have the baby boomers coming into Medicare.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if you've heard what they're saying, but right now we have 11,000 people turning 65 every single day in this country.
I haven't heard that one.
That trend's going to continue over the next, 7 to 11 years. So, I guess the best way for me to put it to you is I hope you like to share. Okay. Because what that's going to do is that's going to triple the amount of people that Medicare has to pay the bills for. Now, here's the thing. I think Medicare knew that as they gave us access to better health care that we were going to live longer. And I think they have known since about 1945 that the baby boomers are coming.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one area that they didn't necessarily have the best idea on is the fact that medical costs started to rise and they started to go through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And when you couple all of those things together, Medicare did this survey and they found out that if they didn't make some cutbacks, they were going to run out of money. And so what they've done is they've slowly cut back what they approve and pay to a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then a few years ago they had a really large cutback to what they pay a doctor.
Then a lot of doctors don't see Medicare patients anymore.
Some doctors have gotten to that
Oh,
point.
a lot.
And here's how that all affects a senior.
Excuse me.
You go into the hospital or go into the doctor and you have a major procedure. And when I look at a major procedure, I'm looking at a cost of about $150,000.
Right.
Okay, it doesn't take long to have something like that, a bypass surgery or maybe some cancer treatments or a hip replacement, stroke, any of those types of things are going to come up with costs like that. Now, 4 or 5 years ago when Medicare got a bill like that, they would have reduced it just like they do today, except it wouldn't have been as much.
Right.
They maybe would have reduced it to $135,000 to $140,000,
Mm-hmm.
but because of the cutbacks in Medicare, as a matter of fact, I told you, I'll show you, back up all the information that I talked to you about.
Mm-hmm.
We've actually got an article in here when it talks about that, and it was put out by the American Medical Association, and it talks about the cutbacks that Medicare has gone through, and you can see year after year after year how these costs have gone up for the doctors, the practice costs.
Mm-hmm.
And right here you can see how the Medicare cutbacks have kind of widened the gap between what the
Right.
doctor charges and what Medicare charges.
Right.
And you notice right here in 2010 there was a big drop.
Yeah.
And then even year after year after year it's going to continue.
Yeah.
So as you see that this gap continues to get wider and wider, you can understand why they're a little bit concerned with it.
Mm-hmm.
So for today's purposes, we're going to look at this amount and we're going to say, okay, when Medicare gets a bill like that, they're going to come back with an approved amount, maybe of about 2/3 of the bill. which means Medicare is going to approve $100,000. But that's not what Medicare pays. Okay, Medicare steps up and pays 80%, or in
Of
this
that,
example,
yeah.
$80,000. And as a senior, that's why you get yourself your supplement, because the supplements, I don't care which one it is going to pick up, and it's usually going to pay the other 20%. And for years, that meant seniors didn't have anything else that they had to pay for. But remember, as this gap got wider and wider, these
Yes.
doctors started to get a little frustrated. They started to say, I'm not going to give a senior that kind of a discount. I mean, they looked at this and they said, there's $50,000 extra dollars hanging out there. I can't do that anymore. So they started coming after seniors for it. Medicare jumped in and said, nope, can't come after it. So the doctors said exactly what you just said. Then we're not going to start taking them anymore. So Medicare came to this realization that in order for Medicare to keep working, they had to make a deal to get the doctors to continue to see you. And believe it or not, they've been talking about it in your book for a long time. Let me show you. In your book, right here, they tell you that they, meaning doctors, can charge you more than the Medicare approved amount, but there's a limit called the limiting charge. Not only can they charge it, but you as a senior might have to pay the entire charge at the time of service. So Medicare is telling people about it, but if you think about how it's written out there, it's still confusing.
Yeah.
So let me put it back into English for you. Medicare says the doctor can't come after the full $50,000, but they'll now allow any doctor to charge any senior an extra 15%. 15% above the approved amount, just like it said.
Okay.
Okay.
So they're going to recoup.
Well, if you take 15% of $100,000, that's an extra $15,000.
Right.
And it's what we call an excess charge.
Oh yeah.
Okay? Here, let me show you here too, because that just talked about limiting charge, and this in here talks about the actual term that I just used. We're even going to circle it in your book here. Alright, right here it talks about the excess charge. And it says, if you have original Medicare and the amount a doctor or other health care provider is legally permitted to charge, if that's higher than the Medicare approved amount, the difference is called the excess charge. Okay? So, like I said, Medicare's been talking about it. And as you can imagine, it's this part of the bill right here that's absolutely been blindsiding seniors across America. So that's the first area that we're going to have to take a look at and see how that affects you.
Yeah.
Do you have your insurance card?
I do.
Grab it for me.